Well, let's dig a little deeper on some of the latest developments that led to this new trade deal and what Canadians should be watching for. Dan Ujczo is a trade lawyer and an expert on North American trade. He joins me from Washington today. Dan Ujczo, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me.
Great to be with you.
Give us your perspective on this final flurry of movement on the new NAFTA, as we call it. How did the deal finally get to the finish line and across it today?
Well, it was a very active weekend, I'll say that, to say the least. A lot of it had to do with House Democrats holding firm on their demands. But like all things with the USMCA, whether it was in 2018 and now 2019, in fact, in 2017, it really came down to the calendar. We were up against the deadline once again, just like we were last year, and nothing fixes attention like a deadline as we were looking at the going home for the holidays on December 20th. So the idea was get this done. We have the election here in the U.S. by 2020, and meanwhile, we're doing all of this while impeachment hearings are being scheduled, being held, and potentially a trial in the next couple of weeks or so. So a lot of things conspired, and frankly, timing's everything.
How much different is this deal from the one that was presented to the Democrats and that Canada had originally signed? I mean, tell me about some of the big changes here.
Well, I just emphasize that point. The USMCA that we're now seeing at the end of 2019 is significantly different than the USMCA that was signed at the end of 2018. In particular, significant changes to labor issues in Mexico. Mexico had originally agreed to engage in its domestic labor reform on issues there, but House Democrats said that wasn't enough. And what we've seen are some new dispute resolution processes so that when folks feel that there are labor violations happening in Mexico, there's rapid response teams, there's new burdens of proof in those claims. So at the end of the day, it's going to make it easier for folks that feel that there are labor violations going on in Mexico to bring those claims. The fear on the business side is that could actually be a disincentive to investment in North America, that if you're constantly looking out over your shoulder for inspections or perhaps false claims or those types of things. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. There's also a big win for pharma that was given, and data biologic protection, that was completely removed. That was a concession that Canada and Mexico had made in the original deal. That is now completely removed in order to get some House Democrat votes there, and that was strongly opposed by about 160 House Democrats when that was signed last year, and so that provision's come out. So this deal is different. I think it's really important that companies take a look at what's in this deal this year, because there are these changes. This is more than Botox. These are not just cosmetic changes. They are very significant.
Right. Some people have suggested that Democrats have tweaked the deal, but sounds like you're saying it's a fairly significant rewrite here.
Absolutely. Well, President Trump promised to rip up NAFTA. We know that's not true. About 60% of the deal includes many provisions of the original NAFTA, just freshened up, a fresh coat of paint. But this is certainly more than a rebrand for all the reasons that I've just mentioned. This is a complete renovation of North America. We put some fresh coats of paint on. We added some new fixtures and appliances in areas like digital technology, customs provisions, border issues. And then we knocked down some walls on areas like automotive rules of origin and labor enforcement, environment, et cetera. And I think any of us that have done a renovation in our home know it always takes longer. And when you start knocking down walls, and it always costs more than you think it was. So I think we're going to have to take some time to get adjusted to what this renovated new North America looks like.
Right. So they're all at the podium in Mexico today in this signing ceremony, suggesting that, look, it's a win-win-win for everybody. It's a much better deal than NAFTA was. I mean, can they say that? I mean, when you look at this from all angles, not everybody can be a winner. Clearly, some people aren't going to be happy. Mm-hmm. But does this move the trade marker significantly down the road from what NAFTA was?
Well, I think the biggest win is that it's a woo. We made it through all this. We still have North American trade. And when you look at what's going on in the rest of the world right now, we are transforming our relationships with Asia, particularly China. There's obviously some great uncertainty on what's happening in the European Union with Brexit and elsewhere. Right now, the biggest win is that North America is the safest harbor for trade and investment. It's going to take some time to get used to this deal. As you indicated, there are some folks that are going to benefit from this deal. I think on the whole, it will be a plus up from where we were with the original NAFTA, but there are some folks that didn't get what they want. And we're going to see how that plays out over time. But I do think right now, when you look at what's happening in relative terms around the globe, North America is where the action is. This is going to be the safest place, and that's great for both the U.S., Canadian, and ultimately the North American economy.
One of the still issues, I think, for a Canadian audience will be the issues around aluminum production. Aluminum workers being concerned with Mexico's reluctance to tighten the definition of what constitutes North American aluminum, as it did with the provisions around steel. Do you see that as a significant problem?
No, I don't actually, because I think we have to look at the totality of the agreement. And I think when you look at just an overall, we were moving in a different direction to allow steel and aluminum from around the world into North America and ultimately count as North American steel and aluminum. We've now set that threshold at 70%. It's obviously it's going to be a little bit more difficult for steel to qualify than aluminum. But if you also look just down the road at all the changes that were made to the automotive rules of origin and other areas of advanced manufacturing, and we've done a great deal of work to close that back door through Canada and Mexico from China, I think on the whole this should be a stronger deal ultimately for steel workers and aluminum workers. You know, I grew up in Youngstown, Warren, Ohio. You know, the Steel Central.
Right.
I don't use the phrase Rust Belt, but if there is such a place, it's there. You know, but I think this is ultimately a good deal for workers in all of those sectors.
What happens next? Are all the hurdles out of the way now? What do we watch for?
Well, I think we're going to see the House Democrats sprint to the finish line on this. The Congress leaves next week. I mean, we are living in a bit of a bizarro world where House Democrats are going to be passing President Trump's trade deal at the same time that they're passing articles of impeachment on the president next week. And then there will be a time during the holidays. Once the House passes impeachment articles, the Senate actually is not permitted to consider anything but impeachment. So there'll be a little bit of delay while the U.S. Senate takes up the impeachment. But sometime, I would say probably mid to late January, we'll see the U.S. Senate give that second sober thought and ultimately pass the deal. There's going to be, look, I mean, if the history of USMCA and all of our trade deals teaches anything, there's going to be a lot of noise over the holiday season and a little bit after. But I think at the end of the day, USMCA is about as close to the finish line as we've ever been.
All right, Dan Ujczo joining me from Washington today. Always good to get your perspective. Great to talk to you again.
Always, Peter. Thank you.